Amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second in the series of webinars all about how we get money moving through the economy and into the hands of small firms. I'm very delighted to be joined today by a good friend of mine. I have known this man for a number of years and watched his absolute incredible progression in the banking industry, and in particular, what he is now doing at Allica Bank. Richard Davies, CEO of Allica Bank, a very warm welcome to you.
Great to be here, Emma. Nice to see you again.
Lovely to see you. So, Richard, of course, you and I came across each other in a previous role that you had. You've been at Allica since 2020. Just give our viewers a sense of your career in the lead up to you joining Allica Bank.
Yeah, sure. So I spent a lot of time in my career with the major banks, so places like Barclays and HSBC, almost all that time in SME focused roles at various kind of seniorities. I was then immediately before Allica at Revolut, so I was the sort of number two there, the COO for the group, which was very interesting from a sort of product technology and kind of hyper growth standpoint in terms of learnings. And I think also probably most relevant to say, just if we go way back in my career to when I was still at university, probably my passion for working in small businesses came there actually, because I did sponsored by Shell. It was like a industrial placement with a small business, a tree surgery, and sort of discovered some of the joys of working with a smaller company and sort of the value you can add and the help you can bring. So yeah, I guess that's sort of given me the passion to work with small businesses kind of throughout my career.
I love that. I didn't know that. Were you the one who went up the trees to cut the...
No. So I was doing an economics degree at the time, and so I sort of came in and helped on a whole bunch of stuff, but particularly around sort of their marketing and growth approaches. The company was maybe 40, 50 people at the time, and it was sort of quite eye-opening, I guess, for me as someone who was still clearly quite young and relatively inexperienced, but I was still able to, I guess, help sort of help them, given you just don't have that sort of degree of specialisms in a company that size. So it sort of gave me that sense of you can actually really help, and I guess that's always sort of motivated me throughout my career, that you can if you can really help improve the business owner's life, you can help them grow their business, that's good for them, and it's good for our society.
Lovely. And we're going to come back to growth in a minute, but this is a lovely segue into the mission that you're on, because you have publicly said you want to transform banking for SMEs. So Richard, just give us a sense of what does that mean, and how are you going through that, and how are you delivering that at Allica?
Yeah, and I think probably important to start by saying we're quite focused on what we call established small and medium-sized businesses. So we typically say that's sort of 5+ employees, or maybe $500,000+ revenue. I guess it's where the business starts to have sort of increasing complexity, but to my point earlier, haven't necessarily got lots and lots of specialist resources managing HR and finance and all that jazz. So we think that space is one that's not been particularly well focused on. The major banks used to do it via their branch model. They cut that back. They've cut back the relationship managers. A lot of the other fintechs outside of us have focused on consumer and the micro businesses, typically one-person businesses, and that sort of space of in between the micro business and the corporate business, no one was really focusing on particularly. And we thought, look, it's about a third of our jobs, our economy. This really matters. So how do we really come in and try and create a full service replacement for the major banks?
And just give us a sense. So I love how the fact, because having been there myself, and I can really empathise with this, that you get to a set number of people, you're growing as a business, but you haven't got that specialisms in-house. How does Allica help those type of businesses?
Yeah, and we're not saying we can solve all problems for all businesses, but I guess clearly we're particularly able to help on the sort of financial side. And I think there's sort of a few things we sort of try and do there. Firstly, I guess within banking, we definitely do believe the relationship manager is an important thing for businesses. Can be a really good source of help, of connectivity into people that can help if it's beyond the sort of financial domain, and empathy. I guess it can be lonely running a business. So we try and invest a lot in technology to keep our sort of back office lean, to make it easy to do things, but in order therefore to be able to afford the relationship manager still for the client that a lot of major banks are withdrawn for this size of client. Secondly, financing can be quite important. So we've built out a full range of financing capabilities, and we try then to, I guess, really find a way to say yes to the client. Now, you can't always, clearly, but very much trying to be positive about how you approach helping a client to finance its growth. And then finally, on the banking side, value. So particularly when it comes to current accounts, cards, savings, we think the industry provides very poor value in general. There's far too many fees, there's far too little interest. So we've been very much trying to champion and much better value provision for this sort of size of client, which we think is being kind of taken advantage of by a lot of the major banks. And then beyond banking, we've also started building a range of what we would call financial operations tools that help if you're running that sort of 10-person or 30-person business. So going into areas like expense management, paying bills and invoices, paying payroll, these sort of things. So we're quite excited by that ability to go beyond just the traditional banking products, which we do very well, but also into some areas that are sort of adjacent in the sort of finance space.
Amazing. Well, I'm delighted that you've started to pick up on the topic of payments and paying bills, because, of course, as you know, at the office, we're very focused on making sure that small businesses get paid on time. So, Richard, what has always been kind of almost throughout your career, but of course, particularly at Allica, what has been your approach to faster payments for small firms?
So, I mean, listen, clearly there is a significant payment problem. It's still, sadly, in the UK when it comes to small businesses getting paid, and yeah, we definitely hear that pretty often from clients. So, and I think the interesting thing is people often say they're getting paid quite promptly, when, let's say, they've got 30-day terms, they're getting paid like day 35, day 40. It's generally being stretched to the end of the month, and that's kind of defined as promptly, which kind of sets quite a low bar, I guess, right? Because actually it's beyond the terms that they gave, but people kind of think that's okay. So it does feel like there's a real sea change still needed here in the kind of UK culturally, and everyone seems to be trying to get the most possible cash flow out of their own kind of supply chain by paying late, which is not great. So yeah, I guess something we can all lean into and try and change, but yeah, clearly can be quite dangerous for a small business if you've got a significant customer paying you late, and it can sort of endanger your payroll to staff and or your ability to pay other suppliers who you may depend on. So yeah, it's a super important topic, and one I know you're championing very hard. So very keen to support.
Amazing. I was going to say, rest assured, we are doing so many things to address the kind of issues that you just raised. And I'm sure our viewers know, because they kind of follow our work, but everything from the Fair Payment Code, which is the soft power of celebrating good payers, through to kind of coming soon is government's response to the late payment consultation, which will look at potential legislation. So kind of getting a bit more feisty. So yes, lots going on to try and solve an issue that you say is quite clearly there. But you, of course, have also had a busy time recently. So you have just raised a recent amount of funding that has turned Allica Bank into the latest unicorn. You are a fintech unicorn business, which is amazing, and you're growing at such a pace, Richard. So kind of share with us, how a CEO, how are you kind of keeping on top of that growth? And maybe a little bit about how your particular role is changing as you can continue to scale.
Yeah, completely. So yeah, we actually are the fastest growing company in the UK over the last 5 years, which is quite cool. And yeah, it was nice to see that recognised in the valuation last month when we raised a new round to keep growing our lending. So when I came here from Revolut, I think we had about 70 people. So actually we were, ironically, despite being a licensed bank, actually kind of in our target size segment as a client for our own clients. I mean, we're now sort of what 850, 900. So that's grown a lot on headcount. Clearly on revenue, that was sort of what mentioned with the fastest growing company in the UK. So that's grown a lot. And yeah, the role changes dramatically, I think, with that. I mean, listen, it's clearly very rare to have that sort of hyper growth, but I think any company that's scaled, I think particularly it's employee base that sort of really can change the nature of the job, because how you work as CEO and how you organise and what you delegate when you've got 70 people looks completely different to if you've got, say, 800 people. I think it's one of the things actually I try and think about most consciously as we do grow, because I have a really passionate belief that your ability to execute is fundamental to your competitive advantage. And actually, as companies grow, typically actually you get much worse at execution, because with 70 people, let's be honest, it's generally quite a top-down model where you as CEO are quite involved in everything. There's not that many different things going on. And at 800 people, you cannot be, otherwise you are the bottleneck, and everything slows down because of you and you alone. So I think that question of how do you build out the team, how do you delegate to the team, how do you build out the sort of structures beneath that allow some of the right autonomy while still remaining sort of aligned to the mission, to the strategy, I think is absolutely fundamental. I think it's honestly the most important topic in scaling a business really successfully to try and master. And don't profess to have mastered it. I still keep trying to learn every day. And I think AI right now is going to change that equation again quite fundamentally. So right now I'm thinking very deeply about what AI does to what I've just described.
And it's really interesting. And I was going to ask you about your learning, because you've had a phenomenal career in banking, but you've never actually kind of taken an organization from 70 to kind of 850 people. So you're learning on the job, but where do you go for your learning?
Yeah, and listen, I guess I've had some sort of past experience which has been helpful. So to Revolut, while I was there, went from maybe 800 to 2,000 people. So started from a much bigger scale, but was growing very fast. So I certainly saw some of the good and the bad that comes with that sort of super hyper growth. But no, I guess what I've tried to do is go and read quite a lot actually of companies that have successfully scaled, that are sort of tech enabled. Because some of this is about scaling the sales org or operations piece, but because we're building our own technology as well, there's quite a lot there about how do you scale the engineering side of things. And so, yeah, I've sort of read voraciously of the bios of some of the great tech-enabled company leaders, and some of those people who have worked in those companies. So if I was to name one book, actually, I think that the best book I've come across in that respect is called The Geek Way, which is kind of a study of quite a range of tech-enabled companies, and sort of what are some of the ways of working and organizational practices they've used that help them to kind of keep this execution speed and quality really good as the company's grown a lot. So yeah, very much trying to keep learning. And I think with AI, that's sort of the harder thing now, because to date, you can go and read these bios or other books or what people have done in, say, 2010 or 2015, whereas there isn't kind of really a playbook written yet as to how does a company change? What do you need to think about? How do you organize? How do you bring people on a journey with AI? So that's the kind of thing I'm thinking about very deeply.
I totally agree. I was only thinking about this morning in terms of where can I go to sign up to an event that will tell me everything about AI. But of course, once you've been to it, the next day it's kind of outdated. So I agree that pace is such a challenge. And talking of pace, because as I say, you're still moving at quite a pace, you're still growing so quickly. At this date, what do you think we can expect to see from Allica across 2026? Because I'm sure amidst all of this change, you have got a very stable plan. So what can we expect to see from the bank for the rest of this year?
Yeah, and I think actually the great thing for us has been our mission, and our strategy has been completely unchanged throughout, which I think is one of the things that most helps execution, because if you're constantly pivoting strategy, clearly you're throwing away previous execution work. So yeah, this mission is to transform finance for established small and medium-sized companies. That's always been about building this sort of full service capability that can fully replace the major banks, and both banking and into financial operations. So we now have all of the foundations of that in place. We're scaling very well. So we've got penetration into about 5% of the target segment currently. We'd love to sort of bring that to maybe 7.5% the next year or so. So that growth very much continues. I think when I think about sort of services within that, I'm most excited about, I do particularly focus on working capital, and comes back to this topic of prompt payments, which is sadly the reason why people need working capital mainly. But yeah, I think we focused in our early years on more term lending, which is good for capital investment and so on. We have got working capital products, but we've been particularly trying to really focus on growing those. So we did a lot of work to rebuild and make our overdraft product great last year. So we think overdraft is a criminally undersupplied product now in this segment. Overdraft balances in the UK economy to SMEs have dropped from something like 20 billion to about 3 billion over the last 20 years, and just collapsed right as the major banks pull back on this. And then we bought a business called Korea, which does invoice finance, so another form of working capital, in October, and really want to scale that up as well, because again, clearly that addresses that point of, if we are seeing clients paid on 60-day terms or 90-day terms, how do they finance that as they grow? So particularly excited to see that kind of working capital side of things build out, because that's probably the newer side of our product set in the last kind of year or two.
Love it. So let's just end on a final kind of piece of advice relating to payments. So for those businesses who are listening, what would be your one top tip on how a business could get paid on time and not use your working capital solution?
No, which actually we would much rather, right? I mean, yeah, I'm very mission driven, right? So if people can get paid early and not have to borrow, that is a much better thing, right? So I think for us, what we see there is, how can you be as organised and deliberate about managing collection of invoices as possible, which clearly is easier as you get to a bigger company. You can have dedicated resource on it. But there are clearly tools that can help with this to sort of drive automatic chasing. But I think you can't just rely on that. Often the phone call and sort of the emotional connection therefore that attaches to that can be important. But it's one of those things that it's not managed. It does generally stack into issues. But yeah, we see clients that do this best, typically being very, very organised and deliberate about how they do it. So should they have to? Probably not. So hopefully the great work you're doing can really help that.
Love it. So great organisation. You yourself are running a great organisation. So Richard, we will continue to watch your growth at Allica Bank, and I'm loving the mission that you're on, which, as you say, is to transform banking and financial services for SMEs. We wish you all the best in your continued mission, and thank you so much for joining us today. Richard Davies, CEO of Allica Bank. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.